Please join me in welcoming to the stage, from the CBS show Blue Bloods, the showrunner, Mr. Kevin Wade, and star of the show, Mr. Tom Selleck.
Here? Yeah? Okay. Hi.
How's everybody feeling this morning?
Good. God, I'm awake.
Good. Good to be awake.
My second interview.
It would be a very different interview if you weren't awake.
I've been there.
I think as a good kickoff point, as an introduction to the show, I was wondering if you could go back in time to when the pitch arrived for each of you to come and be a part of the series. What that pitch was like. How did they pitch the show to you?
I'm curious. I'd love to hear what Kevin says.
Well, I actually came on in the first season. So they had done the pilot. I knew Tom. I'd worked with Tom before, and I knew Leonard Goldberg.
He saved a movie I was in. He rewrote it.
So I knew Tom, and I knew Leonard Goldberg, who was the creator, executive producer. It was his idea. And so I went in about the third or fourth episode and talked to them just about coming on as a writer, and wrote, I think, 3 episodes the first season, and then started running the show after that. So I wasn't there at the pilot. Tom, which I will hand over to Tom, who, they built this around him.
I was in the enviable position to be asked to be in it, and they sent me the script, and I went in and talked to Leonard and Michael Cuesta, who was directing the pilot, and I really liked the script because in an era of procedurals, it seemed to have a very strong character element, which I found unusual, especially at that time, which was 7 years ago. And it had this great family dinner scene, which we have a scene where this family of cops gets together once a show or once a week in screen time, and has a family dinner, and all these colliding arcs come together. And I said, but it's 8 pages long. The network isn't going to go for that. You're going to cut it, aren't you, down? I said, because I wish you wouldn't. And Leonard said, well, no, we're not cutting that scene. In fact, that's going to be a set piece of the show.
Right.
This was Leonard's concept. He saw a Norman Rockwell painting. I think it's called Thanksgiving Dinner. Famous painting of a family sitting around a turkey. And he thought, what if that family were a family, all of them in law enforcement? And that was the family business. And that was really Leonard's creative concept. And it was, at that point, nice to be asked. And I said, look, I left Magnum to have a family. And where are you going to shoot this? Right? And he says, we want to shoot it in New York. I said, that's what I thought. I said, you should shoot it in New York. But I got some problems because I want my family to remain a priority. That's a lesson I learned. And he said, well, let's work on it. So he found a way, long story short, to get me they'd squeeze my work. We shoot an 8-day episode. They'd squeeze me into 4. The last 4 of one show, and then the first 4 of the next, so that I could commute, which is also a curse. I've done about 75 round trips.
Racking up the miles.
At least. And anyway, but and I have to say that we all of Donnie, Bridget, Will, and myself all felt the show should be shot in New York, that it is a central character in the show, and not in Toronto, or pretend that while you're in Vancouver, you're actually in New York. And all 4 actors, I think it says a lot for the kind of cast we have. All of them relocated so we could shoot the show where it belonged.
Now, in the show, you play Police Commissioner Frank Reagan.
Yes.
Who is 3rd-generation military vet and police officer.
He is probably a 3rd-generation military vet. The fun thing about our series is I may find that out next episode. I don't know that answer. He is 3rd-generation cop, No, your character, you go back in time as you go forward, and you learn more and more about him. It's very interesting. Yeah,
And he's
third
also
generation cop. That was the family business. That's what he went into. He was in the Marines, and he was a beat cop, and he went up through the ranks.
all the way to the top, and now has raised a family who is following in various ways in his footsteps.
I think his great regret was he always wanted to be a cop. He did not want to be police commissioner. Number one, police commissioner is a civilian. If you are in the police force, just like Commissioner O'Neill, he had to resign and to become a civilian employee as a police commissioner. Frank kind of did it out of something that seems operative with him, which is this hyperactive sense of responsibility. There had been a scandal. The cops really needed someone that they looked up to, and his dad said, "You got to do it." And he did it. He doesn't like the job, though. He doesn't.
Which is, it's a little jumping ahead a bit, but it's come up multiple times of the will he or won't he stay commissioner.
Well, there's a lot of things at play. One, he never wanted it to begin with. Number two, soon after he became commissioner, this wasn't in. This was before the 7 years of the show started. The way Frank is, he orders 35,000 people into harm's way every day, and one of those people he ordered into harm's way was his eldest son. Who, now, he didn't give the order, you go out in the street and work undercover, but that's not the way Frank is. So he lost a son in the line of duty. So that weight of responsibility, which I find fascinating as an actor to try and play, because if you're playing the person in command, you can't really show weakness. You can't show that you're frightened or worried or insecure. You have to put on a command face, but at the same time, you've got to find a way to let the audience know what's really going on inside. And that's his constant battle, and as it's 7 years into a show, it's probably, 8 years into his job, and the weight just keeps weighing on him. And he's lashed out a few times at our mayor to give the mayor an excuse to fire him. He would love an excuse to say, "I did my duty, but they don't want me anymore." Which makes him much more fun to play.
You mentioned the mayor, and that leads me to another question, and Kevin, this might be more in your wheelhouse. The show is set in New York City. It is the actual NYPD, but it sort of lives in a fictional bubble universe. You don't use the actual mayor. You have a character mayor. When you're crafting that world, where do you find yourself drawing the lines of what you can borrow from reality and what you need to create to, give yourself the freedom to make the show what you want it to be?
That's a good question. Let me see if I can make a good answer. It is a bubble. It is a story about tribes. The Reagans are very much a tribe of Irish Catholic military, now police, coming from Bay Ridge, Brooklyn. So they are a very specific part of New York. So we can be very specific with them. As far as the mayor, we never try to portray, here's a version of Mayor de Blasio, or here's a version of Commissioner Bratton or Kelly. We just try to make the characters seem as if they come from their worlds and their tribes without doing Romana Clay kind of stuff, because I think that gives us more latitude to tell the stories that we want to tell, which are, at the end of the day, we try to be very balanced and show both the cop side and the criminal side, the politician side and the bodega owner side, and that everybody who lives in New York, as all of you know, lives on top of each other.
At the same time, I think we want to be accurate, and so the actual structure of the NYPD, what really goes on, we don't take a lot of liberties with. We try to keep within the constraints of that reality, even though we're doing a fictional show.
Yes, we have a guy, Jimmy Nusiforo, who's a lifelong cop, retired as a Gold Shield detective, who's our technical advisor. And one of the things that's fun about doing the show and some of the great feedback we get is that we don't ever drive around Jim. He says, this couldn't happen, it doesn't happen on the show. More often we'll try to find things like, well, how could it happen? And he'll find a way for us to do it. There's an actor, I'll tell you quickly, there's an actor coming on to play a chief in the next episode. A very good actor, and he has a goatee that he can't shave because he has a recurring part on another show. NYPD brass are not allowed to wear facial hair. So
Yeah, they're allowed.
this one, yes. So I asked, and
We checked.
He's an African American actor, and so Jimmy found out that there is because of his skin condition, there are outs. So we're going to put in a line that he gets to wear the goatee because of razor bumps.
Well, cops are pretty rough on each other, so it's probably going to be kidding of some sort.
Yeah. But it comes from that, trying to get it right.
Mm-hmm. Now, inside this fictional bubble, though, as the show has progressed, it's noticeable that there are reality touchstones, that current events that happen, things that are unavoidable on a global scale. Do you ever feel an obligation to reference those things, include those things? Is there a glove-handed way of taking current events and working them into the show without breaking that barrier?
I think Kevin's.
As the writers, we steer around that, but we do research. So when we've had the serendipity of an episode going on that reflects something that's in the newspaper, it really came out of either research or among our writers, and there's very few of us. One is married to a cop, one is the son of a cop, and one studied law and got a law degree before he became a writer. So we have people who are pretty well versed in what's going on, what are they talking about? Mm-hmm. And out of those conflicts or those issues or that new rule or that thing happening, we'll make a story, and 2 or 3 or 4 times a season, they'll match up, which is great. Yeah. And it looks like we grabbed it from the headline, but if you track it back, we couldn't have because we started the story 4 months earlier.
Yeah. And in a way that's happening tonight. You don't have to stay home tonight and watch the show.
They have DVRs and stuff. They're all teched up.
Now really curious.
I know, you can. But tonight is about negotiating with a gang member who killed a police chief, and Frank feels the necessity to do it. His sons and father have a big problem with that. It is timely in the sense of the headlines we're reading in Chicago. But those things are serendipitous, but not planned. And I would find it, a little tacky to just try and exploit some real life issue. We coincidentally have had a lot of shows where it looked like that's what we did.
Yeah.
But it's like Kevin said, that started 4 months before that idea. And they're genuine police issues that deal with both sides of the coin, I'm proud to say, in the police business. So sometimes that happens, but it's not a device.
And as you said, the family dinner is a set piece to the show, and it's one of the more talked about portions of every episode. And one of the things that I've noticed about those scenes is how broad the moral point of views are inside the family.
Yeah.
And even to the point where sometimes characters you sort of expect them to fall on one side and they end up on the other. In this case, you're kind of advocating for going to the table against
reluctantly, yeah.
The character of your father's
he's not going to tell them that, but that's part of his dilemma. Is the chief who was killed was one of his best friends, and he knows that this chief would never have done that. Mm-hmm. So it's his dilemma.
It's not really fair to reduce any of these characters down to like party line politics or anything like that. But can you talk about some of the political character identities of some of the characters on the show?
Well, but Kevin always said, Kevin started writing Frank, who you'd say, he must be a conservative, but Kevin wrote, I'm grateful to say, this bleeding heart side of Frank that maybe you can comment on.
I think and forget the phrase that comes to mind is secular humanism. That all of them, for whatever they are, can only surprise you if you peel back the layers and go, I never would have thought that guy would have come down on that side. And once we free ourselves up, we are obviously, as I said, a tribe. So Roman Catholics, cops, ex-military, DA's office, all down the line. But then to be able to do what we're about to do, our 150th episode, you have to, every episode and every season, peel something back and surprise the character and the actor playing him, and hopefully thereby the audience, and give these people layers to themselves. Otherwise, we couldn't do what we do. You know, if it was just, well, he's this and he's this, you're coming back week after week to hear a version of the same story.
Plus, you're going to constantly confront differences in the character you play than who you are or what you believe. And we are actors. That is part of our job, to put some of those things aside. It's not your job to blow your own horn, in my opinion, just as much off-screen as you do on-screen. In either case, you are playing a character, and you are informed by that character, as I brought up earlier. Ironically, more and more as time goes by, I didn't know any of Frank's background when I started this show. And as we've done episodes, you're finding out his past as well as who he is. And the other thing that we seem to be dedicated to is a cumulative narrative. Not a soap opera, but we don't ignore what's happened in other episodes to make it easier to write this episode. If Frank has had an experience, people don't mind people who make mistakes. I don't think people necessarily like stupid people. So if he's doing the same stupid thing over again to make the character wonderfully eccentric, it's probably a little stunty. I've had a lot of experience. There was a guy when I did Magnum, I know his name, Professor Horace Newcomb at the University of Texas, because in those days, other than a soap opera, even a nighttime soap opera, you ignored the cumulative narrative. And I started, because that's not the way I learned to act, when I got on Magnum, I said, I can't do that. We just did an episode where I did this. And they go, you don't understand, we forget all that each week. We won't have any stories. I said, I can't do that. That's the only way I know how to work. And Horace Newcomb at the University of Texas gave us credit, maybe it isn't us, as the first show that wasn't a soap opera on nighttime television that actually did a cumulative narrative. And it was one of the big strengths of Magnum. There was this very dark story that, maybe 4 or 5 times during the season you revisited. And the revisiting involved Vietnam, which the network said, the pilot was nice with those Vietnam flashbacks, but you don't mention Vietnam. Please, it's death. Because in those days, any Vietnam vet was a guy with delayed stress out in the jungle, killing people. And we said, we're going to do it. Don Belisario was a Marine. I'm a veteran. And we said, this is a part of who they are. Magnum is really about 4 ex-warriors. And that's why we're in the Smithsonian, which was very gratifying. The 8th year, they put my shirt and my Detroit hat, those silly items, in the Smithsonian as the first show that recognized Vietnam veterans in a positive light. So sometimes it pays off.
You've also just done a veteran recognition on Blue Bloods as well, dealing with the psychological return of a couple of veterans who were trying to...
Yeah, there's an interesting thing that we started to get into in that show, that for all the good work we've done learning about delayed stress, or what's the present term for it?
PTSD.
PTSD. Yeah. Veterans don't mind talking about PTS. They hate the D. They don't want to admit to a disorder, but they have to get treatment. That being said, we've done such a good job. I think the general population can make the mistake that people who served are damaged. When you've done as much work with veterans and seen active duty people as I have, when you've been on an aircraft carrier and see a bunch of 19-year-olds running a flight deck, which is incredibly hazardous, you realize they're the best people you could have hired. And in the episode you're talking about of Blue Bloods was dealing with the fact that somebody came in and in a touchy-feely way redid the psychological exam, where if a veteran answered it truthfully about shooting, they wouldn't get hired.
Yeah.
So they were coached to not answer that question truthfully. So Frank's dilemma is, I can't have guys cheating on an exam, but we value vets. Vets make very good cops. So it was pretty interesting.
Again, that strong political and moral guidepost that Frank tends to be as the patriarch not only of his family, but as kind of the patriarch to the entire police department.
The other aspect I really enjoyed about the pilot script is what you just said. Homer Simpson's an idiot. A lot of, that's the dad's name, isn't it? I don't watch that show. And a lot of dads on TV are idiots. And Frank is very flawed, and increasingly flawed as we're finding out. But he is a man who tries to do right by his family. He is a strong patriarch. And I'm not on a mission. My job is to entertain people, but the fact I can play a strong patriarch and present a little different image about fathers, which are very important in this whole equation, I think it's a good thing.
Speaking of the father figure thing, this sort of tangential, but the show was originally created by Mitchell Burris and Robin Green, who are probably more well-known for creating The Sopranos.
Well, they wrote on The Sopranos. David Chase created The Sopranos.
Right.
Mitch and Robin won a couple of Emmys, 2 or 3. Were part of the writing staff of The Sopranos, yeah.
And it's that sort of background, and then it's commonly referenced. I mean, you yourself even said family business, referring to the Reagan family. Can you talk about the parallels that the show has to this sort of organized crime structure?
I think, you know, it's organized, it's a family, it's really, I think tribe is really the word for it. But their own customs, their own interpretations of loyalty, of sacrifice, of what is right and wrong. And so I think it's that. And anytime you tell a tribal story, it's going to have that wonderful effect of sort of, it seems to draw back the curtains on, oh, that's what they're really like behind closed doors, whether it's the mobsters in the Bada Bing or the Reagans around their dinner table. And I think that's one of the, you know, tricks that you're trying to give people the feeling that that's the way those people really are.
Parallels to The Godfather have been drawn, which aren't that far off.
It is striking to, if you just grab a random episode and watch, get hit with this, wow, there is this sort of, I mean, I would hate to call it nepotism, but there is a lot of discussion that goes into strings that Frank will pull for his sons or won't pull at all.
Well, mostly won't.
Yeah.
He has got such an attitude about that, and he is so overcompensated. I used to make notes. Frank would never have his sons up. To get to his office, that's on the 14th floor of 1PP. That means everybody in the building knows his kid is coming up to see him. And he's just hypersensitive about it. We just finished an episode where some of the people closest to him said, you know, with regards to Jamie, who is still a beat cop by choice, even though he's gifted, that it is Frank and the whole NYPD, who knows how Frank feels about nepotism, that don't want to offend Frank, so they don't offer Jamie some of the things he would have been offered. It's a very good episode. Will's terrific in it, and it's confronted a little bit and articulated. Yeah, Frank's probably overreactive about that.
Looking back at the seasons so far, is there a particular topic, either a political topic or an emotional topic, that stands out as being like the most difficult thing you guys have had to tackle with the show?
That's another good question I wish I had a good answer to, because it's, well, anytime we deal with veterans, just because we try to be particularly aware that they get very little real estate in popular culture outside of that cliche of the PTS guy who can adapt to life, but so we've tried to treat that not with kid gloves. If we do the show, when we do it well, we have a soapbox, and we have a soapbox of equal height right next to it. And we present both points of view, and hopefully in an entertaining and kind of, in a dynamic way. So I think anytime we take on a social issue, if we do it well, it's really that you manage to give the criminal side, or the poor minority side, because you've got cops. The cops are going, I can't police your neighborhood if you don't help me. We get into a lot of that. We have on the show a black mayor who is came up as a community activist. So we have that whole cabal, and then over here you have the thin blue line. And when we can get them both going, because both have good points, as hopefully in the world, most great discussions, both sides have a valid point of view. And that's really what we, try to do. So it's not really picking so much one as picking the ones where you can really convincingly portray those 2 points of view in the audience, because he's got a point, and so does he.
I didn't realize you were writing everything down. Can I change some of my answers?
Yeah, but I don't know that it'll go back and change on the text.
David Ramsey, I've talked to David, great guy. Those of you who don't know the show, David does play our mayor, who then was shot and is now confined to a wheelchair, who wonderfully accused Frank of patronizing him because he was treating him differently now. But they're combative. I talked to David, and we have a Sharpton-esque character, but he's wonderfully played by Otto
Asanda.
Yeah, and I've talked to both of them. I said, there's so many actors in television that either make the decision themselves or are pushed in a direction that if you're playing the bad guy, you got to prove you're bad. Bad guys don't think they're bad. Hitler thought he was a pretty good guy, I think. I don't. But see, you have to say that if you mention Hitler.
They're writing it down.
Yes, it's all up there. So I've said to Otto on several occasions, I've said to David Ramsey, if you don't ever feel you have enough bullets on your belt, the way the structure of the script is, we want to know about it. Kevin wants to know about it. Because otherwise, it's not, there are points of view on both sides of those things, and the work's better, the scenes are better, the conflict's better. So it's important to us.
Yeah.
Well, and I think it's really paid off on the show.
Thanks.
We do want to leave some time for audience questions. So if you guys do have some questions, make your way to the mics. We'd love to hear from you. As they're getting set, though, I did want to bring up, this season will see the 150th episode of Blue Bloods to air.
Just finished writing it last night. Start shooting
pressure.
on Tuesday.
Yeah, no pressure. Yeah. And you're writing it yourself.
Yeah.
That's congratulations.
Thanks. It's once in a while we look up and there's like that number on the scoreboard, and the CBS sends cupcakes, and there's generally a couple of events.
That's all they said.
That's right.
And it puts you just 13 episodes shy of Magnum PI's run.
Yeah, I was talking to Charlie Rose this morning. I did the CBS show, and you just keep plugging away in episodic television. There's not very much time to think, and Magnum, 8 years of Magnum seemed like it took forever. 7 years of
7 years of this.
7 years of Blue Bloods has been like a snap of the finger. I'm not kidding. Time goes by differently. It's not really fair. It should go by slower when you get older, but because you appreciate it. But Magnum did 163 hours, and if Les Moonves so deems, our boss, sometime in the early part of next year, we will get to episode 164. I mean, that's quite a blessing. A lot of things beyond whatever your talent is, whatever your point of view is, whatever, no matter how much you've studied, a lot of things, including luck, go into, I mean, getting 2 long runs in a lifetime. I hate to use the word career. It sounds right. It would look bad up there.
I read, and this citation needed, I can't prove this, but I read that while you were on Magnum, you were considered for both the roles of Indiana Jones and the Terminator.
I was never considered for the Terminator. Oh. Nobody called, nobody wrote. When I was not on Magnum, I don't mind saying I didn't get to do it, but this history keeps evolving. I did not turn it down. What happened was I had shot the pilot for Magnum. I went to test for, I was the last guy in town to test for Indiana Jones, for Steven Spielberg and George Lucas. I probably, because I'd blown every screen test I ever had, because you get nervous. You know it's a big break. I didn't put a lot of pressure on me because I probably had this pilot, and they offered it to me. And I met with them, and I said, look, you know, I have done this pilot. And they said, you're actually telling us that? Because most of the time nobody tells us this stuff. I said, yeah, it's kind of the way I was brought up. They said, we're not worried. We got cards to play with CBS.
I wasn't gonna ask the regret question. I was actually going to ask if you felt either of the 2 actors that got those roles could stand in Frank Reagan's shoes.
Sure. And Harrison's sick.
I've worked with Harrison.
Yeah.
I know.
Harrison's
Not for 150
sick of hearing
episodes.
that story. And then, of course, Stephen put my screen test in one of the anniversary editions. Screen test isn't so good, by the way. I don't know what they were thinking. It's Harrison's role. But yes, Harrison has the kind of chops. You've got to, if I have to prove I'm the boss, then they cast the wrong guy. That's why I don't like to play I'm the boss. I want to play something a little more complex than that.
Let's take a question.
Hi, my name is Alex. I'm actually a beginner actress, and I just wanted to, since I have the opportunity to tell you something, I just wanted to tell you that you are one of the people who taught me English. Because, yeah, when I was a kid, we lived in Poland. It was communist country, and my father would go every Sunday to buy illegally VHS tapes on black market. And since I was a kid, I couldn't read that fast as subtitles were going, so I would listen. And my father bought Her Alibi, and it was became one of my favorite movies since I was a kid.
Thank you for that.
If any one of you hasn't seen Her Alibi, it's funny. There's romance. There is action. It's really cool.
You know.
So I want to actually tell you that since I can.
Well, you're welcome.
Yeah.
Good for you.
I work with kids a lot, and it's about people who have supposedly achieved something, sharing their failures mostly. And General Shalikashvili got up, former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He's passed on now, and told the kids that he learned English by watching John Wayne movies.
So you're one of my John Waynes then.
Thank you.
And actually, Arnold Schwarzenegger is the other one because I also watched Terminator a lot. So I do not have his accent though.
Thank
you.
Let's go over here.
Thank you. That was great.
Taking one from this side.
Thank you so much for coming. This is really amazing. And also, my girlfriend told me to say that she loved you as Richard and Friends, and that...
Don't you think Monica really loved Richard? I think so. But I had to think that way because I'm an actor.
She said that he was way too good for Monica. But I watched a recent episode of Blue Bloods, and I think it might have been the most recent one. It was on the diplomatic immunity issue,
Yep.
and what really stood out to me was that it seemed to be very explicitly trying to inform both about the diplomatic immunity plotline, which I actually did learn a lot about from watching the episode, and then also kind of the parallel plotline about like sexism in traditionally masculine careers. What I was just interested in hearing you speak about a little bit about both is about kind of like narrative television as an educational medium and its capacity to do that, both in terms of your own perspectives as well as the perspectives you've actually seen in the industry over the years.
I'll start. Again, what I think I mentioned before, those stories came out of research. I mean, obviously there's, on any job in any office place, and certainly a police radio car is a very close quarters office place, as is the precinct and the locker rooms and the muster room. So there is, that's out there in the air. But I think for, that story about the female cop whose boyfriend sort of said bye-bye when he saw her in action, I think is a legitimate fact, probably. We didn't take it as a fact. We didn't read it in the paper. We just thought this character, it's time for her to go through that. The other one was just very well researched. And again, the writing staff tries to just, let's find out what would happen if, what would be the facts. And then we get that kind of story, hopefully step it out in 5 acts that's both entertaining, a little bit informative, hopefully suspenseful or whatever. Yeah. But it really comes out of that, just trying to push the noise aside. We don't try to capitalize on, gee, we need to do a story about fake news, or we need to do a story about right-wing this so then, we can just put our head down and do it. But thank you for watching that and for your question.
It's a difficult, I think you need a compass. I mean, you do have an obligation to inform, but you also have an obligation to entertain. The message, in my opinion, is never as important as that obligation to entertain. But that puts us in our occupation, rather honestly, writing and acting, in the creation of heat business, not always shedding light. Shedding too much light can get in the way of the heat, and vice versa. So I wish the news media was in the shedding light business a little more than the creating heat business, or the other avenues we were just talking about. But it's a constant balance. Jimmy Nusfaro, he also plays my chief of the Commissioner's Protection Detail. And he will always come to me in every scene and say, what about your security detail? Because they're with the commissioner all the time. I said, Jimmy, I'm just going to the bathroom. Can we, or I got to talk to this guy alone. We got to stretch the reality of it. There are a whole bunch of things that my character's done that wouldn't be done without that detail hovering. Right. And I said, it kind of gets in the way of the drama here, and he's very good about that.
Thank you. Please.
Hi, Tom. Thanks for coming, both of you. Having portrayed law enforcement roles for so long, do you find yourself still learning lessons about that profession, and are any of them still kind of surprising to you?
I think it's always surprising. I'm fascinated, and I'm an admirer of the NYPD. I became much more so when I did this show and started looking into it and started looking at the standard. And what was the show we did recently where I can't remember the conflict of a cop where he couldn't actually, where he had an obligation off duty, even with his daughter, to intervene in
right.
a situation. He didn't necessarily have an obligation to get into a shootout, which he didn't do, but he got in enormous trouble because he did nothing except call 911 as soon as he felt his daughter was safe. That's a pretty gray area, and one where you start to realize that often a high school educated man or woman is being held to a standard that I don't think most people really understand or recognize how difficult it is.
Yeah.
But he got in a lot of trouble, this cop. He's with his daughter, everybody gets that. There's a robbery of a bodega. He's shielding her and going to the assistance as soon as he can, and he's in big trouble because he did not act in some way.
I think we got time for maybe these two more. You guys go ahead.
Hey, Tom and Kevin, thanks so much for coming to Google. My name is Frank, and my dad and I are big fans of the show. We especially like how you film on location in all the different neighborhoods that we know and love here. What's the best way for fans of the show to get a behind-the-scenes look when you do those filmings in and out of all the different boroughs here in New York?
You should talk to one of the tabloid photographers. They always know where we're shooting.
I'm pretty sure because of the way we do our show, we don't have any mechanics set up to welcome, unfortunately, people in to watch us. But I believe there's a website, and you guys would know this much better than I would, but there is a website that basically harvests the permits that New York City issues for shooting and puts them up, and it says Law and Order will be on White Street today, Blue Bloods will be at Center, Street, and so I'm sure it's very easy to find and come down.
That is not an encouragement to go.
No,
I don't want to get arrested. I don't want to get arrested.
It makes it rough. And New Yorkers, when I had never shot for an extended period of time on the streets of New York. I've done movies here, but in L.A., you put up a tape line to separate the crew from the spectators, and they're held back, and everybody seems to do what they're supposed to. New Yorkers, they don't listen to rope lines and tape lines and stuff. And we've done many scenes where we just stand there, let's just shoot it.
Yeah.
Let's just shoot it and hope they don't stare at me and jump into the crowd along the sidewalk. And Donnie does it all the time. So does Will.
New Yorkers also, and it's, God bless them, they come by and, is it a movie? Yeah. No, it's a TV show. Oh, all right. Yeah. Or you get, what TV show? Blue Bloods. CBS, 10 o'clock, Friday night, Tom Selleck, Donnie Wahlberg. Oh, yeah. And it's all, and then moves on. It's part of New York.
The other side of New York, though, which is very pleasant, as a celebrity, you still got to go to the market, and you still got to go to the drugstore, and maybe you're buying something you don't want anybody to know you're buying. Nothing illicit, just stuff. New Yorkers are great in this era of smartphones and everything else. Most New Yorkers still just want to say, "Hey, like your work," or "How you doing?" And they move on, maybe because they're all busy, which is a good thing, but it's getting rough out there with in the smartphone era. I really, you're going to see more and more celebrities that just say, "I'm sorry, I don't want." If you're asking my permission, respectfully, no. It's going to end up all over the world, and people are going to make up a story that goes with that expression. I just think we have to develop a new set of manners and prerogatives in terms of these mediums. A celebrity is a little ahead of that time, but I'm sure it affects us all much more and more. I mean, just somebody sees something and up goes the thing. I was taught when I grew up, I got in trouble as a kid. It's rude to point. Don't point those things.
I agree. Thanks for sharing.
Thank you.
All right, time for the last question.
Thank you guys for coming. Thank you for the infamous mustache. A gift to society.
I would be disappointed if I didn't get a mustache question.
I thought of the last one. I got to say something about the mustache. But I do want to hear a little bit more about promoting a diversity of thought within the screenwriting, within working with other actors. At Google, we're constantly saying it's important to hear other perspectives and to listen, and maybe it's not your own. But I want to hear a little bit more about kind of how do you promote it both on the job and out? How do you incorporate it into screenwriting and the importance of it? I just want to hear a little bit more.
Diversity of thought?
Yeah.
I think it's real important. I'll make notes. Everybody make notes. This isn't about anybody's political stance on our show. No. I mean, family dinner. I mean, I thought originally, boy, aren't we saying grace too much? But the plain and simple fact is, Irish Catholic families say grace at the table. And we never got any static. We're not on our religious high horse. That table has Jews, and I'm Episcopalian. I kept getting the cross thing mixed up. I did it backwards, and Bridget would have to elbow me. And there's too much diversity of thought at that table itself. I know you don't really see any of us. I think it's a mutual respect thing. I don't, the world would be fine without that group of celebrities at that table getting involved in every political campaign or every issue. And there's a kind of mutual respect. There's a lot of great variety of opinion at that table and out in the world. And I'm kind of an independent in a business that's largely liberal, but here's the deal, it's a gift for me. I don't make those kind of judgments about people I may disagree with. The people I know that I may disagree with, they got kids, they love their kids, they love their family, and it's been a great gift for me to get a diversity of thought from a point of view where I don't know who pulls the lever for whom, but it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
But did I answer your question? Go ahead, Kevin.
From a storytelling point of view, obviously we shoot in New York, and one of the great treasures is that New York is so diverse. And I talked about the Reagans are a tribe, and they go out into the tribes of New York, the Russians in Brighton Beach, and the people in Sunset Park and here. And there's a lot of them, and for us who have to write 22 of these a year, it's the great gift to the storytellers is to be able to go out. What are their customs? What is considered a crime? What is considered loyalty? What is considered, and that's been the greatest part in some senses of being able to get into 7 seasons, because we can go and there's these Coptics in Sunset Park, and they have this beef with the other Catholics and Christians, and so it's all the stuff that makes up stories. So we kind of embrace it and go, thank God they're here, because otherwise it's hard to tell.
Great. Well, the show is Blue Bloods. It does air on CBS on Friday nights. Please join me thanking you, gentlemen. We really appreciate you coming.
Thank you. Thank you.